Hey guys, welcome to BudgetEDH. On this week's episode, we bring you Tasigur, the Golden Fang, at a $100 budget. Tasigur is 5 and a black for a legendary creature with Delve. Each card you exile from your graveyard while casting this spell pays for 1. And you can pay 2 and a hybrid green blue, put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard, then return a non-land card of an opponent's choice from your graveyard to your hand. With this Tasigur deck, we're going to focus on a control strategy. We're going to take our time and build up to the win. We do want to be able to stop our opponents from comboing off, and there's a heavy disruption element in this deck. There are many pieces of interaction in this deck that will help you stop your opponents and control the game very early. We also want to have a lot of ramp in this deck. We want to be able to get down a bunch of ramp spells as quickly as possible, especially at 1 and 2 converted mana cost, so we can have as much mana as possible to keep open to control the game. There's a lot of recursion in this deck. Tasigur's ability is recursion itself, and then we did include a couple of other cards that will help us get back all those interactive elements in our graveyard, in addition to Tasigur's ability. And then we included 4 different combos that we can use in this deck to win the game, and different win cons to win based off those combos. Let's start with this deck tech by talking about all the ways that we can ramp in this deck, and there are quite a few ways that we can ramp, including creatures that we can ramp with, and also mana rocks that we can ramp with as well. We want to keep all of our ramp to a very low converted mana cost if possible, because we want to have that mana so that we're able to control the game early and get that extra mana so that we're able to keep it open for counter spells and for other things. So first up, we have Llanowar Elves and Elvish Mystic. They're both a green, and then they tap for a green mana. And then Elves of the Deep Shadow taps for a black mana, and it will deal 1 damage to you when it does. Then we have Arbor Elf. It's a green mana for a creature that taps to untap target forest. And then Priest of Titania is 1 and a green for a creature. Add a green to your mana pool for each elf on the battlefield. This is one of the more powerful ramp spells in the game, especially since we do have a lot of elves in our deck. And then Incubation Druid is 1 and a green for a creature. You can tap to add 1 mana of any type that a land you control could produce, and if it has a +1/+1 counter on it, add 3 mana of that type instead. And then you can pay 3 green and then adapt 3. So this will give you that counter if you pay that adapt cost. Then we have all the signets. So we have Golgari, Dimir, and Simic Signet. They all cost 2 generic mana, and then you can pay 1 and tap it, and it's going to add 2 different colors to your mana pool. Next up, we have 2 talismans in this deck. They both cost 2 generic mana, and then you can tap to add a colorless to your mana pool, or tap it to add 2 different colors to your mana pool, but they will deal 1 damage to you. And then Felwar Stone is 2 colorless for an artifact. Tap it to add 1 mana of any color that a land an opponent controls could produce. And then last but not least, we do have Soul Ring. It's 1 generic mana for an artifact. You can tap to add 2 colorless to your mana pool. Next up, let's go over all the draw that we have in this deck and or the card selection spells that we included. So first up, we have Brainstorm. It's a blue mana for an instant. Draw 3 cards, then put the top 2 cards of your hand on top of your library in any order. Next up, we have Ponder. It's a blue mana for a sorcery. Look at the top 3 cards of your library, then put them back in any order. You may shuffle your library, and then you draw a card. And then Preordain is 1 blue for a sorcery. Scry 2, then draw a card. Next up, we have Impulse. It's 1 and a blue for an instant. Look at the top 4 cards of your library, put 1 of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. These are all really great draw spells. They give you the ability to look at several cards off the top of your library and then choose the best one. And then next up, we have Fact or Fiction. It's 3 and a blue for an instant. Reveal the top 5 cards of your library. An opponent separates those cards into 2 piles. Put 1 pile into your hand and the other into your graveyard. And then Dig Through Time is 6 blue for an instant that has Delve. Look at the top 7 cards of your library, put 2 of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. Delve spells are really good with Tasigur because you can delve out all those cards that you don't want your opponents to pick when you use Tasigur's ability. So it's a really great card in this deck. And then next up, we have Occam Adversary. It's 3 and a green for a creature. This spell costs 2 less to cast if an opponent controls a green permanent. It has Death Touch, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. This card is great. More often than not, you're going to be able to play this for 1 and a green. It's going to come down and it's going to be able to deal damage to your opponents because they're not going to want to block it because it has that Death Touch on there. And it's just going to draw you cards over the course of the game, which is exactly what we want to do in this deck. Next up, let's talk about some of the interaction that we have in this deck. Now, we are playing a control strategy, so there's going to be a lot of control elements here. So first up, I'm going to go over the counter spells that we include in this deck. And first, we have Dispel. It's 1 blue for an instant, counter target instant spell. Then there's Counterspell, blue for an instant to counter target spell. And then there's Negate, 1 and a blue for an instant, counter target non-creature spell. We do want to put as many counter spells as we can in this deck because we want to be able to control all elements of the game. Next up, we have Muddle the Mixture. It's blue for an instant. You can counter target instant or sorcery spell, and then also has Transmute, which can serve as a tutor in our deck. So you can transmute for 1 blue, discard this card, and search your library for a card with the same converted mana cost, but you can only play it as a sorcery. And then we have Arcane Denial. It's 1 blue for an instant, counter target spell. Its controller may draw up to 2 cards at the beginning of next turn's upkeep, and then you draw a card at the beginning of next turn's upkeep. Counter Squall is blue and a black for an instant, and counter target non-creature spell. Its controller loses 2 life. Next up, we have Mana Leak. It's 1 blue for an instant, counter target spell unless its controller pays 3 generic mana. And then Tail's End is 1 blue for an instant, counter target activated ability, triggered ability, or a legendary spell. Narset's Reversal is one of my favorite counter spells to come out of recent sets. It's a blue for an instant, copy target instant or sorcery spell, then return it to its owner's hand. You may choose new targets for the copy. So you can play this on your own spells and get that spell back to your hand, but you also get the copy, or you can use it to steal one of your opponent's spells, and then they get to return it to their hand. Drown in the Lock is another new one out of Throne of Eldraine. It's a blue and a black for an instant. Counter target spell with converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of cards in controller's graveyard, or destroy target creature with converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of cards in its controller's graveyard. This is great, especially in a control deck where we're going to be filling up our graveyard. It's also great in Tasigur too, because we will have a ton of stuff in our graveyard over the course of the game, and being a modal card makes it a lot better than some of the other choices. Next up, we have Unwind. It's 2 blue for an instant, counter target non-creature spell, untap up to 3 lands. Next up, we'll go over some of the spells that deal with permanents or creatures that our opponents have on the battlefield. So first up, we have Rapid Hybridization. It's 1 blue for an instant. Destroy target creature. It can't be regenerated. That creature's controller puts a 3/3 green frog lizard creature token onto the battlefield. And then Reality Shift is 1 blue for an instant. Exile target creature. Its controller manifests the top card of their library. And then to manifest, you're going to flip up the top card of their library. To manifest, that player is going to put the top card of their library onto the battlefield face down as a 2/2 creature. If it's a creature card, you can turn it face up anytime for its mana cost. And then we have Go for the Throat. It's 1 black for an instant. Destroy target non-artifact creature. Next up, we have Beast Within. It's 2 and a green for an instant to destroy any permanent. Its controller creates a 3/3 green beast creature token. This is great because it can also deal with lands or any other problematic permanent on the battlefield. Putrefy is 1 a black and a green for an instant. Destroy target artifact or creature. It can't be regenerated. And then Murderous Cut is another Delve card. It's 4 and a black for an instant, and it does have Delve, and you can destroy target creature. Delve cards, again, are really great with Tasigur. We want to be able to get out some of those dead cards out of our graveyard and have our opponents pick the cards that we really want to get. And then we have Nature's Claim. It's a green for an instant. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. Its controller gains 4 life. Next up, we do have a board wipe in this deck. It's Crux of Fate. It's 3 black for a sorcery. You can choose one. Destroy all dragon creatures or destroy all non-dragon creatures. Since we are playing control, we do want some ways to be able to get back some of our interaction in the deck, and also to get back our combo pieces if our opponents are able to counter them and we don't have a response to it. So we did put in some cards that will get you back cards from your graveyard and put them either back to your hand or on top of your library. So first up, we have Reclaim. It's 1 green for an instant. Put target card from your graveyard on top of your library. And then Regrowth is 1 and a green for sorcery. You can return target card from your graveyard to your hand. And then we have Eternal Witness. It's 1 green for a regrowth on a creature. This will return back any target card from your graveyard to your hand as well. Next up, we have Archaeomancer. It's 2 blue for a creature. When it enters the battlefield, return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. This is a really nice card to include in this deck because not only will it get back an instant or sorcery card, this will also combo with another card in our deck, Deadeye Navigator, which we'll go over here in a little bit. And then one of the most powerful cards in this deck is Seasons Past. It's 4 green for a sorcery. Return any number of cards with different converted mana costs from your graveyard to your hand and put Seasons Past on the bottom of its owner's library. This can be a combo card. If you have an extra turn spell in your deck that goes to your graveyard and you have a tutor in your graveyard, you can play Seasons Past, get back that extra turn card, get back your tutor, you can take an extra turn, and then you can use your tutor to go find Seasons Past again, and then you can continue to cycle that. Unfortunately, in our budget deck, we don't have a extra turn spell that goes to the graveyard because those ones are a little bit more expensive. There are a couple cards in this deck that work really well with Tasigur. Since we're playing more of a control deck with combo elements, we do want to have as much mana as we can open so that we're able to play those spells at instant speed. And there are a couple cards that will really help us do that. So first up, we have Wilderness Reclamation. It's 3 and a green for an enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, untap all lands you control. And then Seaboard Muse is a lot better. It's 3 green for a creature. Untap all permanents you control during each other player's untap step. Now with these cards on the battlefield, you can play out spells at sorcery speed, and then at the end of the turn, they're going to untap, or at your opponent's untap step, you're going to untap all of your permanents. These are really great because Tasigur does have an activated ability that you can use to get a lot of value off of. You can force your opponent to return back important interaction spells from your graveyard to your hand at the end of their turns, and then you're just going to untap with Seedborn Muse, and you can just keep doing that over and over again. Next up, let's talk about some of the tutors that we have in this deck. Now, we want to have a couple tutors in here so that we're able to find our combo pieces, and we do have a couple of combos that we can win the game off of. If we get one of those combo pieces in our hand, we can easily search up the other one with one of these tutors. So first up, we have Diabolic Tutor. It's 2 black for a sorcery. Search your library for a card, then put that card into your hand, then shuffle your library. And then we have Final Parting. It's 3 black. Search your library for 2 cards. Put one into your hand and the other into your graveyard, then shuffle your library. This one's actually really great in this deck because you can put that second card in your graveyard. You can actually get back later with Tasigur, and that nets you 2 cards, which is awesome in this deck. And then we have Dark Petition. It's 3 black for a sorcery. Search your library for a card, then put that card into your hand, then shuffle your library. And then it also has Spell Mastery. If there are 2 or more instant or sorcery cards in your graveyard, add black to your mana pool. Since we're playing a control deck, we'll have a lot of instant or sorcery cards in our graveyard most of the time. This will almost always have that Spell Mastery with it. And then we did also include a transmute card. It is Shred Memory. It's 1 and a black for an instant. Remove up to 4 target cards in a single graveyard from the game. And then you can transmute for 1 black. You pay that cost, discard this card, search your library for a card with the same converted mana cost as this card, reveal it, and put it into your hand. Then shuffle your library, but you can only play this as a sorcery. 2 converted mana costs get you a lot of different things in this deck. There's a lot of counter spells that you can get, and there are also some combo pieces that you can pick up with this card, so it is worth including in this deck. Next up, let's talk about a couple of Planeswalkers that we have in this deck and a combo that works well with one of them. So first up, we have Ashiok Dreamrender. It's 1 and a hybrid blue black for a legendary Planeswalker. Spells and abilities your opponents control can't cause their controller to search their library. And then you can -1 this Planeswalker, and target player puts the top 4 cards of their library into their graveyard. Then exile each opponent's graveyard. This card's great. If it's on the battlefield, it will shut off your opponent's fetch lands, and they won't be able to play tutors as well. Plus, it also gives you a way to deal with your opponent's graveyards for just -1 on this Planeswalker. And the great thing is too, it does come in with 5 loyalty, so you can activate that ability 4 times and it still stays on the battlefield. Next up, we have Narset, Parter of Veils. It's 1 blue for a legendary Planeswalker. Each opponent can't draw more than 1 card each turn, and then you can -2 look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a non-creature, non-land card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Again, this does have 5 loyalty, so you'll be able to use that ability twice. The best part about this card is its interaction with wheel effects. So if you do use a wheel effect with Narset on the battlefield, you'll draw 7 cards, but your opponents will only draw 1 card. It will put you so far ahead that it will be very hard for your opponents to catch back up once you do that. So there are a couple of wheels that I want to go over. The first one being Windfall. It's 2 and a blue for a sorcery. Each player discards their hand, then draws cards equal to the greatest number of cards a player discarded this way. And we also have Dark Deal. It's 2 and a black for a sorcery. Each player discards all the cards in his or her hand, then draws that many cards -1. There are a lot more ways of doing this in these colors that we can talk about later in the video in the upgrade section, but these are the most budget-friendly ways of doing this. There's also another card that works out really great with those wheel effects, and it's Notion Thief. It's 2, a blue and a black for a creature that has flash. If an opponent would draw a card except the first one he or she draws in each of his or her draw steps, instead that player skips that draw and you draw a card. So if you play a wheel with Notion Thief on the battlefield and your opponents aren't able to stop it, you will draw 21 cards and they will draw no cards, making it almost impossible to come back from that. It's very powerful, and there's a lot of CEDH decks that rely heavily on this combo, and it is a budget card with those wheels as well, which means that we can include it in this deck, and it is a very powerful combo. There are several combos that we include in this deck, and the first one I want to talk about is a 2-card combo that will generate us infinite mana if we have 5 lands on the battlefield. So the first card is Peregrine Drake. It's 4 and a blue for a creature with flying. When it enters the battlefield, untap up to 5 lands, and it pairs well with Deadeye Navigator. It's 4 blue for a creature with Soul Bond. You may pair this creature with another unpaired creature when either enters enters the battlefield. As long as Deadeye Navigator is paired with another creature, each of those creatures has 1 and a blue. Exile this creature, then return it to the battlefield under your control. So the way this works is you have Peregrine Drake on the battlefield, you play your Deadeye Navigator, you can pay 2 mana, float the rest of your mana to blink your Peregrine Drake, and then it will enter the battlefield and untap 5 of those lands. Then you can tap the 5 lands again, pay 2, blink Peregrine Drake again, and you'll have 3 extra mana left over. So you'll be able to make infinite mana with this combo. And with the infinite mana, we can win the game very easily with a couple of cards. We can use the infinite mana to use Tasigur's ability to effectively draw our entire deck. So we'll be able to use his ability to put the top 2 cards of our library into our graveyard. Then our opponent will choose a card out of there, and we'll just keep doing that over and over again until we get our entire deck back into our hand. And then how we're going to win with that combo is with 2 different cards. So first there's Thassa's Oracle. It's a blue for a creature. When it enters the battlefield, look at the top X cards of your library where X is your devotion to blue. Put up to 1 of them on top of your library and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. If X is greater than or equal to the number of cards in your library, you win the game. Once you use Tasigur's ability, you draw your entire deck. You will have no cards left in your deck. You can play Thassa's Oracle, and then you would just win the game. Another way of winning with this is with Villainous Wealth. So you can pay X black, green, blue, and target opponent exiles the top X cards of their library. You may cast any number of non-land cards with converted mana cost X or less from among them without paying their mana costs. So since you have infinite mana, you can just play Villainous Wealth, exile out your opponent's deck, and then you can use Tasigur's ability to put your entire deck into your hand, and then they'll have to select Villainous Wealth, and you'll get that back to your hand. You can do it to your next opponent, and then just do it one more time with Tasigur's ability, and then kill your third opponent that way. The next combo I want to talk about is the interaction that's called Flash Hulk, and it has been running rampant in CEDH circles since Thassa's Oracle has come out. And we're not playing the Thassa's Oracle version because Demonic Consultation and Tainted Pact cost so much money that we can't really include them in our deck. It would take up a considerable chunk of our budget, so we don't want to do that. But there is another budget-friendly combo that we can do with Flash Hulk. So for those of you who don't know, Flash is 1 and a blue for an instant, and you may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. If you do, sacrifice it unless you pay its mana cost reduced by 2. And then what you're going to want to put in with this is Protean Hulk, which is 5 green for a creature. When it dies, search your library for any number of creature cards with total converted mana cost 6 or less and put them onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Flash works perfectly. It gets that creature onto the battlefield and also allows it to die. You'll be able to get those creature cards from your deck onto the battlefield with ease. So the cards we want to look for cost a total converted mana cost of 6. It's Viscera, Lesser Masticore, Malira, Sylvok Outcast, and Disciple of the Vault. And the way this works is with all 4 of these creatures on the battlefield, you have a sack outlet in Viscera, and you have Lesser Masticore, which is a persist creature. So the way it works is you will sacrifice your Lesser Masticore to Viscera, and it will come back with persist. Now, the cool thing about this is that you will have Malira on the battlefield, and she says you can't get poison counters, creatures you control can't have -1/-1 counters placed on them, and creatures your opponents control lose infect. Now, the thing we really care about is the -1/-1 counters. When Lesser Masticore comes back onto the battlefield, if it had no -1/-1 counters on it, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with a -1/-1 counter. So it will come back to the battlefield with no -1/-1 counters on it because of Malira, and then you can keep sacking this creature to Viscera over and over again because it will never have that -1/-1 counter on it from persist. The way we win is with the Disciple of the Vault on the battlefield. So Disciple of the Vault says whenever an artifact is put into a graveyard from play, you may have target opponent lose 1 life. This is a way to infinitely deal as much damage as you want to your opponents as long as they can't break the combo up. It's a very efficient combo, and it is also budget. These are all budget cards, and it is a way to win off of Flash Hulk that isn't Consultation Thassa. Thank you so much for watching this Budget Deck Tech today. If you have any suggestions for some of the picks in this deck, or agree with or disagree with some of the choices, let us know in the comments down below. If you like this video, consider subscribing to our YouTube channel if you haven't already, and check us out on Patreon over at patreon.com/BudgetEDH. There's a lot of different tiers for rewards over on Patreon. See you guys next time.